Apple is scraping its multi-billion-dollar plan to release an electric vehicle, a not-so-secret project that was in the works for almost a decade. The company told employees in an internal meeting this week that the plan, known as Project Titan, has been canceled, surprising the 2,000-person team had been working on it, according to reports. Many of those employees will now be reassigned to Apple's generative AI projects, which will be interesting to see because they have a lot less data than other people because they don't collect it. You were excited about the idea of an Apple car, Scott. I'm surprised they canceled it. Maybe they're working on software. Apple's car was initially envisioned as an EV to compete against Tesla and later a self-driving car rival Waymo, which comes from Google, the Google folks. Elon Musk reacted to Apple's news on X, posting a saluting emoji and a cigarette. Whatever, fuck you. What do you think, first of all? Do you consider it a failure? Or are they smart to get out of the EV game, even though they never said they were doing it?
So, look, a strategy and a vision is meant to be unifying, but not a suicide pact. And you were right. 2 years ago, I predicted they were going to build the most valuable waiting list in history, that this made a ton of sense, and in order to move the needle on what was then a $1.6 trillion market cap company, they would need to go after big game, and the automobile industry was big. I felt that Tesla had unearned market cap at $700 billion or whatever it was then, and that Apple was just salivating to go after some of that. But here's the thing. When the data changes, as a good manager, you have the right and the obligation to change your mind. And a step back from the wrong direction is a step in the right direction. And you know what, Kara? This was absolutely the right decision. Because in the last 12 months, the atmospherics have changed dramatically. And let's just talk about some of those. The EV market is plateauing, if not slowing. All the projections are way overestimated consumers' pivot to EVs. Toyota's looking like a genius right now because they did not go all in on EVs. They
went hybrid, which are popular.
That's right. They went hybrids. Tesla is running up against margin compression. And then you have the company, which is probably the most important company that no one talks about. BYD is now outselling Tesla. Right. So Apple...
But Warren Buffett has a big stake in that?
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But let's look at the market versus where it was, say, just even 2 years ago, much less when this project was probably approved. You have a low margin, capital-intensive product that is subsidized. Basically, every car company in the world has either gotten federal loans, Tesla, or has been bailed out, GM and Chrysler. It's a massively subsidized industry, which makes it incredibly economically inefficient. They have this enormous competitor with a $600 billion market capitalization that is doing really well called Tesla. They have another gigantic low-cost competitor that's actually outselling Tesla right now. And the consumer seems to be pulling back from EVs, and the prices of used EVs are plummeting. And they look at this. In addition, what has popped up? Generative AI. And so the key to strategy is decisions that attempt to cut a swath between market dynamics and your internal competences in order to add shareholder value. And the key to strategy is not what you say yes to, but what you say no to. And even Apple has finite resources, both human and capital. And my guess is they've said, based on this market, which quite frankly looks increasingly difficult, we would rather take our finite resources.
All right, I'm gonna let me give you some thoughts on this. Okay, I think EVs, yes, they have. I think everyone over-invested, right? Mm-hmm. And so I still think it's the direction it's going, period. I think this is the way it's going. I just think consumers aren't quite ready yet. It's sort of the valley of death area that happens in. But a lot of who got into this? Car makers, right? Car makers got into this and are starting to make beautiful cars. Now, as they do that, I do think customers and people don't have worries about charging and everything else. I do think it's going to move. You're going to see in 10 years. I forget how much of a percentage EVs are. It'll move up. It just won't move up this quickly. That's one. Because I do think this is the way things are going. These autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, and then eventually autonomous vehicles. I think that is the direction. I think science fiction has been correct about this, that we will have autonomous electric cars, and in the future when we're dead, when both of us are dead. So I think it's just there's so many competitors now, and now you do have like BYD, and which is just roasting everybody else, and they're coming here. They're looking at Mexican sites to build a factory so that they can move into this area. So I do think people will have a lot more choice like they do with regular cars. That's one. And so, but it's a lot less than the investment. So GM, everybody's pulled back, but they haven't totally pulled back because they realize this is the future. The second thing is Apple. I was always dubious, as you know, about them building the car. I'm like, why don't they just work on the software for the car, like making these electric cars work better? Or Tim Cook never acknowledged this car project and referred to it as work on autonomous systems. I think they should not abandon. I think they should abandon building the car. That was sort of weird to me, but keep at this idea of how to operate transportation vehicles. Right, it's a great area. And as to AI, I think it's very important that they incorporate AI into all their products so that you like assistance, all that kind of stuff. Like they're going to have a harder time in the AI market because they don't collect as much data. But it's a better bet for them to focus on making these products seamless in a new AI environment. Like my Apple AI talks to your Apple AI kind of things. And I think that's where they're going to get the big push of keeping you in the Apple ecosystem. I'm not sure.
You know what I think was likely the final nail in the coffin when they said, okay, it's time to officially announce this is over, is Rivian.
The guy left. Oh, yeah. Why is that?
Well, okay, Rivian's been around a decade and a half. It's executed really well. I have an order on it, Rivian. Real briefly, I'm going to get that ocean foam green Rivian. I've already outfitted it.
Oh, cool.
And I bought a home in Aspen, and I'm going to drive into town, have lunch at Casa Tua, dinner at Cash Cash. I'm going to be a cliche of a douchebag, and everyone is going to love me. And I'm going to put my dogs in the back of the Rivian. Anyways, I love Rivians. I think they're beautiful. They're really popular. They have executed really well. They cost about $70,000. This is an incredibly difficult business, and they probably said, "What's the analog here?" And they're like, "Well, the analog's Tesla." And I was like, "Come on, Tesla got in front of a tsunami when the entire industry didn't want to acknowledge what was happening. They had a spokesperson that brought massive attention to it. Government subsidies. What has happened there is a unicorn on top of a unicorn that gives birth to unicorns, right?" Mm-hmm. They said the analog to what we're trying to do here is Rivian. Rivian has executed well. It's a good-looking car.
Well, interesting. One of the signs of this was, and I remember paying a lot of attention, this guy named DJ, I think it's Novotny. He was sort of one of the early car people at Apple. He left to go to
Novotny?
Rivian, which is, yes.
I think I saw him at the Miami Music Festival. He's right there with Calvin. I like Rufus Du Sol and Calvin Harris more, but he's right up there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Anyway, he went to Rivian, and that was a big deal. Now, as to Rivian, it's interesting. One of the people who follows Apple, Gene Munster, said Apple should buy Rivian. Like, that's how to do it. Like, don't get out, but actually buy it.
That's actually That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah. Do you like that? That's Gene Munster who said that.
But they're just buying losses at this point. I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, but gets them in there. I don't know. That was the alternative. I guess it's a huge project, and they really are focused in on. They should be focused in properly on integrating AI into their systems, and also on their spatial computing. They got to be focused on that more than this. But buying Rivian could be something. I don't know. Could be interesting. Yeah. So he said Apple's a tech company, and tech companies by definition need to grow, and that's the $400 billion question that they have here. They've got all this money. So he feels like to grow the business, you got to get into. They shouldn't. Because he thinks Apple Vision Pro has potential, but the car, they would grow. He thinks it eventually would grow. It's an interesting, he thinks they need to be in a new market, and that why abandon it and stay in this market by buying someone. That's not an Apple thing to do.
They're not acquirers. It's an interesting idea, but Rivian would have to get their financial house in order. It's tough to buy a company that's losing that kind of money right now.
Yeah, but they'd get a great stats. That guy who's the CEO of Rivian's impressive.
It's a really interesting idea. If they could get sort of to or close to break even, then I think it'd be a great idea for Apple. But as you said, Apple doesn't like to make acquisitions.
Doesn't like to do it. They do it. But what's the last one? The headphones. What did they buy last? I can't even remember.
Beats. Didn't they buy Beats?
Beats. Yeah, they bought. We had them on stage. That was a long friggin' time ago. Anyway. It's not like them to do that, but they could be.